Hello, my name is Ben Friedman,
I'm Jalal.
and this is Ben and Brand See a Movie presents The Wild Wild West, where we are breaking down all films within Wes Anderson's filmography. And this episode, we are talking about his first animated film, Fantastic Mr. Fox. Jalal, I'm really excited to be talking about this movie with you.
As am I.
Are you ready to just dive into this movie?
Let's do it, because we have busy nights ahead of us.
We have busy nights, and if this movie is one thing, it is efficient. It is an 86-minute movie. I freaking love the runtime. I've been saying this since the beginning when we started talking Wes Anderson movies. The runtimes are perfect, and this movie's runtime is just
an hour 25.
peak.
Love it.
You can't get any better than this runtime. But let's just start off with how we do it every week. We're starting off with the film historian. You know it by now. This is a really interesting one because this is also Wes Anderson's just first straight up adaptation of a story. You know, he's had inspirations. You can see the Moby Dick influence on Steve Zissou. You can see some of those classical works, either in a little influence of Gatsby, maybe even some of Catcher in the Rye and elements of Rushmore. His classical literature knowledge is there. This is the first one where he takes a famous book by Roald Dahl, a critically acclaimed children's author, one who's had multiple films made already, from The Witches, from James and the Giant Peach, to BFG, of course, comes out after it. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. It's all been there. So to see him get to tackle a Roald Dahl novel is really delightful, and it's really great. And let's just, I'm saying great now because I know we're about to just sing this movie's praises. So
I think delightful is the perfect word to describe this movie.
I would agree with that. But so, talking about the film history of this movie, this is a 2009 American stop-motion animated comedy film. This is a time where stop-motion was the big fad of the early 2000s, with films like Chicken Run, with Wallace and Gromit winning the Oscar in 2000. I think it's 5 or 6 when that film comes out, wins the Oscar for Best Animated Film. It's now starting to decline. We're not quite seeing the stop-motion to the degree that we are seeing it, because one, it's usually a lot more expensive.
Oh, yes it is.
And two, it's always way more time consuming. Like, you are putting your life and soul into something, and expensive can be a relative term because, you know, CGI and animation can also be expensive, but it's just the payoff can be so strong where it's just like, you have to put so much time and effort into just frame by frame shooting something. Like, when you're talking about, like, the fact of, like, when movies are made frame by frame, like, every scene is a still, this movie defines that by, like, perfectly, because every
easily.
scene has to be a still, because that's how they shoot stop motion.
Yeah. If I may jump in.
Yes, please.
Adding on to that, if I had to pick a stop motion film that actually did look like it popped right out of a children's book, like, have you ever seen those like kids books at like the Scholastic Book Fair or something, where it's like the story from a movie and it's just, you know, pictures from that movie? Mm-hmm. If you did that with Fantastic Mr. Fox, it would not feel out of place whatsoever. It would look like it was meant to be that way.
This is maybe a perfect adaptation of what you would expect Roald Dahl's characters to look like in the real life. And with that said, I think this film has a lot of its things working for it. The first is Wes Anderson's sensibilities. Again, this is directed by Wes Anderson, screenplay by Wes Anderson, it's Wes Anderson and Noah Baumbach again, Noah Baumbach, director of Marriage Story. He gets to start working with Wes, so he gets the screenplay credits for this film. It's based on the 1970 children's novel of the same name by Roald Dahl. Did you ever read Fantastic Mr. Fox?
I actually didn't. No.
It's one of my favorite as a kid. I think I've read basically every major Roald Dahl book, and this one was, this and the BFG were always my two favorites. He, for me, was a very influential writer as a kid. I read The Witches. The Witches was the first book that I think just terrified me. Like, I remember reading the book and being scared, and I remember seeing the Angelica Houston movie, and I remember being terrified of it. This film stars, what a cast. Holy crap, what a cast in this film. George Clooney as Foxy Fox, Meryl Streep as Mrs. Fox, Jason Schwartzman, of course, regular collaborator, as Ash Fox, the son of Mr. and Mrs. Fox. You have Bill Murray as Clive Badger, Willem Dafoe as the rat, who's kind of the antagonist villain opposite of Mr. Fox. Michael Gambon, Dumbledore himself, is one of the farmers. Owen Wilson. And Wes Anderson has a role in it himself as Stan Weasel, which I think is the first time we get to see Wes Anderson in one of his own movies. I don't think he's ever even cameoed in it.
Weasel, is he the real estate agent?
I think so.
I believe
he's
so,
one of the ones that's down there, because also Adrian Brody is briefly in this movie as the mouse, the little guy.
Oh, yeah.
Mouse. This film comes out in October 14th, 2009 at the London Film Festival. Premieres in the United States November 25th, 2009. I have fond memories of seeing this movie in theaters. I remember seeing it. My mom did not like this movie. I remember thinking, like, this isn't exactly the Fantastic Mr. Fox I remember reading. Years go on, I end up just loving what he does. It has a musical soundtrack by Alexandre Desplat. And might I just say, right off the bat, a great soundtrack by Alexandre Desplat. It's one of my favorites. And this film has a budget of $40 million and grosses $46.5, which means it was a major disappointment. Like, you need to really...
Seems to be a running theme with early to mid Wes Anderson.
The idea is you need to double your budget minimum. And I think this film has now gone on to have a legacy and a love that I think it's actually probably now considered successful and financially as well. I think one of the big boosts that this film also had is received a very important nomination. And it's the first Best Picture nomination Wes Anderson ever gets. Now, true, it's in the category of Best Animated, but it's still a nomination for Best Picture Animated. It's like, that's still a big thing.
It's a huge category.
Especially when you're going up against the likes of who you're going up against, which in this case is always Disney. This film receives two really key ones. It receives Best Animated Feature nomination and a Best Original Score from Alexandre Desplat. I just wanted to read off a few of the other nominees for that year, just to kind of give you context for 2009. Because, God, you want to talk about a killer slate? You have, this is the movie I'm the least familiar with, The Secret of Kells, The Princess and the Frog, Fantastic Mr. Fox, Coraline, and the winner ends up being Up.
Yeah.
That's a 5. Again,
those are
I don't know
yeah.
the fifth one. Those are 4 really unique animated films. Like, all that brings something new to the genre of animation. Of course, Up being one of the most beautifully animated just films at the time.
Yeah.
With the most heartbreaking opening you've probably ever seen of Pixar at that point. Just like, it really made Pixar feel adult. That and WALL-E back to back in 2 years, because WALL-E wins in 2008. That's amazing. Coraline is such a different movie to get nominated for Best Animated.
I love Coraline. That is one of my favorite movies.
Fantastic
easily.
Mr. Fox is this almost weird indie, like, dream fever by, like, Wes Anderson.
Yeah.
It doesn't fit any real convention. Princess and the Frog is really the first animated film that Disney does that reconnects the audience and brings back kind of that 2D animation.
Yeah,
and
after for a while they were focused super on 3D animated.
And because it's the last one, because 2010 Tangled comes out and we get the 3D models. So it also kind of ends, it's a defining endpoint for Disney's 2D animation. So 2009 is a really interesting year for it. And what I was so impressed with this movie, one, getting those nominations, is that I think this is the key I've always said. And when I was talking about the 94th Academy Awards this year, Joel, I made the point, I think Academy Awards are maybe more important than people realize, because I think there's an easy basis to kind of write them off as a circle jerk for the Academy or for voters or for Hollywood.
Which it is.
It is. Of course it is.
Say it's not.
Every time you get an award, it's kind of self-congratulatory.
Yeah.
In any sport or in any medium, wherever you're giving out awards, it's always kind of a self-congratulatory, like, we're celebrating ourselves.
Yeah.
With that said, in terms for films, why I think you see films compete so hard for it, it brings publicity.
And it decides who gets remembered and who doesn't.
Exactly. It's one of those things where
But at
all
the
of a
same time,
sudden...
people don't remember Spotlight very well.
That's fair. But at the same time, with that, it's also really important because films sometimes get their legacy from this, and they get seen. For instance, Coda, which is right now, it seems to be, and you'll find out if I'm wrong, because this episode will drop Monday, which means the Academy Awards are the night before. The Coda is the clear front runner right now. Not the clear front runner, but it's one of the front runners, and a lot of people are thinking that's going to win. It was a small budget Sundance film that came out January of 2021 on a virtual Sundance because it's COVID time.
Yeah.
It has sustained momentum for 14 months to go on and now be the front runner to win Best Picture in a movie where it only got 3 Academy Award nominations because it just wasn't like, people were like, is this film really have a legitimate chance? And we're going to reward it a few categories that's undeniable in. But realistically, can we give it the top prize? And now it's just like, all this time later, it's like, this film might win Best Picture. Like, that's really important that a film can get that kind of recognition. And again, Coda is a film that deals with people who are deaf. So it's a really great representation and just like spotlight of stories and like trials that children of deaf adults have to deal with. Like, it's a really beautiful story. I can't recommend Coda. I can't wait to talk about it. I know Branson and I have talked about doing that one. But the reason I'm saying this all is the Academy Awards matter for that. And I think Fantastic Mr. Fox got a boost because of the Academy Awards. I think it increased popularity, and I think it also made Wes Anderson a little bit more prestigious.
Good. All good things, because let's see what comes out after this. I know Isle of Dogs comes out a little
Isle
later.
of Dogs comes out in 2018.
Yeah, so that's like
the
10 years
next
later.
film he makes is Moonrise Kingdom.
And there you go.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing where I'm just like, I think he needed that transition point where it was just like, he is a really great indie director to, no, he's one of the best prolific directors working. Because unfortunately, Hollywood thinks in a very Hollywood way.
Yeah,
Hollywood you are either indie, you are a studio, or you're just a really like prolific director. Those are really the options you fit in. You're either really small budget, you're either making Oscar movies, or you are making studio tentpoles.
Or you're Marvel.
Exactly. So the fact is, I think this gets the transition point of Wes Anderson's a really good small director. We love him. He's kind of the Sundance darling. His films do really well whenever they come out. Audiences seem to enjoy it. He has a fervent fan base. This is, I think, the transition point, and then followed up with Moonrise Kingdom back to back, where it's just like, no, this guy's not just a small-time indie director who's like has his fans. This guy's
He's
guy
a
who's
director, all caps.
Exactly. He's that guy. He got the biggest movie star in the world to voice a character in his movie. In a children's movie, essentially. A PG.
Multiple of the biggest movie stars in the world.
He's like, what if he took George Clooney at the height of George Clooneyism. This is a few years after he wins his Oscar in 2006. This is the year he has Up in the Air, which he gets nominated for. It is him kind of at the peak Clooney when he is, a few years disattached from Ocean's trilogy. He's the guy in Hollywood. And he voices Fox. And Meryl Streep's the biggest actress of all time. She voices his wife in this movie.
Yep.
This was like the turning point for his career where it's just like, oh, maybe big actors are wanting to work with the type of director, to the point that his next cast has Tom Hanks in the movie. His next movie is going to have Tom Hanks in a prominent role. You don't get that unless you make that transition at some point. Because let's face it, Bill Murray, beloved, he's not the level of a George Clooney movie star. This is a legitimate movie star. And I'm going to ask you a few quick questions, Jalal, on Fantastic Mr. Fox to frame it.
Yes, sir.
My question for you, I have 3. Is George Clooney well cast as Mr. Fox?
Absolutely.
Is this movie the funniest Wes Anderson film you've seen up until this point?
I haven't seen Moonrise Kingdom in a while. I wasn't on that episode, but I really liked it when I first watched it. I would say Mr. Fox is funnier. So, but I can't remember.
Is this the most rewatchable?
Easily.
I agree on all three of those questions. I think George Clooney is so underratedly funny in this movie.
Oh, no, his delivery is incredible.
It's the thing we forget with George Clooney. It's because he is the world's biggest superstar in the world. It's because he's Clooney. He is just like, he is that guy. He's been that guy since the 90s, and he still continues to be that guy, even though he barely makes movies anymore. He comes in this movie, and we forget this guy has impeccable comedic timing. Just impeccable. His comedy in this movie is excellent from start to end. He has some of my favorite line deliveries in movies. And we're just going to start openly talking about this movie. What is your favorite line of dialogue in this movie? Like, you don't have to give the exact quote, but like, when you're thinking of a scene, like, that line to me cracked me up.
Oh, man. You know, I think the one that really... I think it's just the early part of the movie when you're still getting introduced to the characters. It's just when... it flashes forward 12 Fox years to just them, settled married life. Ash is in there. Ash comes out saying he doesn't want to go to school, and Mrs. Fox is basically just like, nope, you're going. And then George is like, he's very in his things. He just looks over his shoulder and goes like, I love the way you handled that. I just thought it was super cute and set a very nice tone for their relationship.
It does. My favorite line in this movie, and it was one we talked about at dinner a few minutes ago, it's when Rat dies. And Mr. Fox says, redemption. Sure, but in the end, he's just another dead rat in a garbage pail behind a Chinese restaurant. I was in the car because I had this playing because I'm like, I've seen this movie enough. I can kind of just remember it by just listening to it. I've seen this movie countless times. And still that line delivery. And I'm in an empty car. Like, it's just me. I audibly laughed out loud. Like, really loud. And I'm just like, do you know how rare it is for me to actually, like, not just laugh at a movie,
but to crack up?
But to crack up, to hear it for the first time, that joke's still so special. It was that line. It was just like this, such a blunt delivery to a joke. I'm just like, God, like, one, that's such a weird line to put in this movie, but I love that choice.
Yeah, another awesome little exchange was, I don't see it so well during the day. And it's like, you're nocturnal. Your eyes barely work. We have rights.
There's just so many just random characters who just come in. One of my favorites is the whole point where they're doing these like hostage negotiations and they're sending their characters back like letters, and they're doing it in serial killer like cutting it out of a newspaper.
Why did they cut out the letters? I think to hide his identity, but then why did he sign it?
And then it's the next scene right after.
It's the same thing right
where
after.
Fox sends it to him, and Bean is like, why'd he do it like a serial killer? He's like,
because you did it.
You did it. It's just these random little comedy beats in there that make this movie so special.
Yeah.
There's a few things with this movie. Again, George Clooney is excellent. Is Willem Dafoe maybe the most underrated comedic actor working, period?
I mean, he was pretty incredible in Life Aquatic.
He's really incredible in Life Aquatic, and in this role, he's just as like randomly funny. Because he's taking this... I love that he gives him an accent, and I don't think it's French. But it's just
an accent. That's
it's just
what it
something.
is.
It's something just so off. And I actually think this character of Rat is legitimately terrifying. He's a really scary, intimidating force to go up against. I love that one of the things that I love that this movie does, and it's maybe just a limitation just due to the stop motion of it, every character is the same size. Mm-hmm. Besides, like, the humans. Like, the humans are towering over them, but a fox and the rat are the same size in this movie. It's just a weird little quirk of this movie where I'm just like...
But it works.
It
because
works,
if it was scaled to a fox versus an actual rat...
It's just not as funny.
It doesn't work.
Yeah. It's just
because
not as good.
I've seen pictures of foxes with rats in their mouths. Like...
it adds this bizarreness to the world, right?
Yeah, the absurdity is, well, very Wes Anderson, and it totally plays into the entire movie.
I agree. Let's just kind of break this movie down, kind of big plot points. For anyone who has not seen Fantastic Mr. Fox or is not even familiar with it, which I'm not sure is going to be a ton of people listening to a Wes Anderson podcast, but we'll break it down for everybody. This film follows Fox and Mrs. Fox. Film starts with them as a couple, and they realize that she realizes she's pregnant, which makes Fox give up his hunting days. He's now going to go straight. He's going to be clean. He's going to be a journalist. 12 years later, or 2 years, but 12 years later for Fox years, as the film reminds us, he's getting antsy. It's in his nature to be a hunter.
Yeah, that's one of the themes of the movie.
It's in his nature.
I'm a wild animal.
So he has to do it. And he has this son named Ash, who Ash is a very eccentric child. He doesn't quite fit into Mr. Fox's legacy. You know, Mr. Fox was an amazing athlete. He's one of the best Steelers. He's one of the best to ever do it as a Fox. Ash is just kind of this weird little child. And it's this conflict between him, and then you have this character of the cousin of Christopherson come in, who's everything you'd want in a Fox. He is legitimately he's the young Mr. Fox. Mr. Fox takes a liking to him, brings him on his crew, because ultimately Fox realizes he is not happy with his life. It is to him mundane, and to him he doesn't have enough. He's never satisfied. He wants to live in a bigger house, so he decides, you know what, I need to provide for my family the one way I know how and in my nature to do. He goes out hunting chickens at the Three Farmers Ranch, led by Mr. Bean, who...
Not that Mr. Bean, a different Mr. Bean.
But Mr. Bean is a turkey and apple farmer who makes apparently what is supposed to be the best apple cider in the world. That's where the movie that's the premise of the movie. So obviously from there on, you can kind of get the idea. Maybe one of the reasons this movie works, there is a more humane look at George Clooney in this movie, but it's also kind of the same character he's playing in Ocean's 11. Like, it is just kind of a straight up, like, we're on a heist, we're going to take all these things, like, I'm assembling my crew.
Well, yeah, but if you think of foxes in popular literature, what do they represent?
Yeah,
sneakiness,
yeah.
They're sly, exactly.
But that's where it's kind of the perfect fan casting, where it's just like, I've always said the one thing Wes Anderson does so amazing, and maybe better than any director, he knows how to get an actor and play to their strengths and just find the perfect actor for that role. He kind of nails that with Fox, because we know who George Clooney is. He's Danny Ocean. And in this role, he gets to do a lot of the Danny Ocean stuff. It works. It really works.
A charming criminal.
A charming criminal. And that's what Mr. Fox is. And I think it's so funny that we also see in these films, Wes Anderson has this dynamic that's running through all of them, where it's characters who kind of just can't let grudges go and just have to keep over-escalating each other, leading to these just wild kind of adventures taking point. Because both the characters of Mr. Fox and Mr. Bean, they work perfectly together because they're perfect antagonists. They're the perfect flip of the coins. Because they're both two people who don't know when to stop. Like, at multiple times, Mr. Bean should not have tried doing... Frank Bean should not have tried doing what he was doing. But also at a time, there should have been where Fox was like, okay, I really need to stop this.
Yeah, he needed to rein it in. He could have at any point.
So they're the perfect yin and yang for each other. They're this just great dynamic because they're essentially one and the same character. They're just, one is human, one's a fox.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at it. One thing I did want to talk about, something I jotted in my notes on my phone when I was watching the movie, is, if I can change the subject a little bit.
Of course.
Going to how Wes Anderson's style transcends different media. You know, you have all these live action movies that feel very Wes Anderson, and then here comes this animated claymation movie, and what do you know, it feels very Wes Anderson.
Isn't that cool?
It's super cool. And it made me want to take a look at other directors and see what they could do with a huge style shift or a medium shift, you know?
It's that really cool thing where...
What happened if James Gunn did a stop motion film?
That's the thing. Why do we not... We don't get directors jumping into animation. We'll get the inverse. We will get an animated director who makes live action films. That was Brad Bird, who started off with The Incredibles, The Iron Giant, then gets to make Mission Impossible 4 and makes maybe the best Mission Impossible film. We get that every so often. We don't get the case of a
live action
director going animated. I can think of a few. Wes Anderson's the clear one. And Lord and Miller, Phil Lord and Chris Miller, who did Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, then went into 21, 22 Jump Street, and then went back in to help make Spider-Verse and Mitchell's versus the Machines. They've done it to a degree. But besides that, we don't have a ton of directors who are just like, you know what, I'm going to make an animated movie. It's weird. Like, I kind of want to see
It's weird, but it's also because animation is super difficult.
I know, it is. It's a challenge to do. And it really suits certain people's sensibilities.
Yeah, the fact that Wes Anderson did so well. Well, actually, claymation or stop motion really does lend itself to a more eclectic style. And Wes Anderson really does fit that bill. So if he was going to go animated, stop motion seems to be the kind of perfect fit for him.
Agreed. I agree. It would be weirder if this film was traditionally animated.
Yeah, like 2D or 3D. Of the films, if it was 3D, it wouldn't have been nearly as good as it was.
I think a lot of the charm is solely the animation, because we also get these... I mean, I love the fact that Fox is in a corduroy suit the whole time. And it's clearly, like, cut from the fabric of corduroy. Like, we're seeing it, like... The film does it so well because sometimes stop motion feels delicate. Mm-hmm. This one, it feels, like, grungy and kind of real. Like, it's like, oh, those fabrics are getting dirty. Like, we're seeing those characters adjust, and it's really smooth in its animation, like frame to frame to cut.
Yeah.
It's really seamless. Like, and they do it in a way because I think they slow down the frame rate in the movie. So all of a sudden our eyes are able to adjust. So these characters, the way they move, it just looks more natural because we've already had our eyes adjust to how these characters should move. Because a lot of times what will happen is just like, oh, it's frame. And even though, like, it's not really present, you just know it's there. And you can just feel it. This one is just like, no, well, they, like, take the time to, like, make, like, they stick with shots. It's not like we have a lot of these scenes where it's just like, cut. It is like, we'll get a line of dialogue or two where the characters in the scene doesn't change. It's just those two characters talking in place, and it's shadowed enough that you can't see their lips not moving. That's brilliant. That's an easy way to get around it, and it makes the film feel so much more seamless.
Yeah, and that final fight between Fox and Rat was almost entirely not there.
I know.
And I thought that was hilarious.
He does that, too, where he's just like, he breaks sensibilities and the common idea of what that scene should be like.
It reminded me of this joke. You ever seen Gravity Falls?
A little bit.
Yeah, they did this one episode where it was like a 3-part like mini episode, and one of the parts is an homage to classic stop motion animation. And during a big climactic battle in it, quote unquote, it's focused entirely on the characters watching it go down.
Yes.
And they're commenting about like, wow, that looks really expensive. It is. And I thought it was super funny.
Yeah, dude, the thing, like, with this movie that, like, impressed me throughout was just that, like, you're right, the sensibilities of Wes Anderson are completely present in this movie. They're seamless in this movie. And you have actors in this movie that's just, like, I don't see them doing any other, like, real animated project. Like, I don't think George Clooney has done an animated film since. I can't think of one. I don't think Meryl Streep has. Jason Schwartzman's such a specific character to be in animation. Owen Wilson's, of course, is Cars, but he's not in this movie a lot. Like,
wow.
You have these characters like Willem Dafoe would be he's such a unique voice actor because we know who Willem Dafoe is. Even like a character like Wallace Waldarsky. They're just these character actors that's just like, they fit in Wes Anderson's world, and he somehow is able to transcribe it into fitting into our animated world. It's a pretty cool achievement. One element that we haven't really talked enough about is this film is full of great characters. this is the one film so far that I've seen in Wes Anderson's filmography that I would say every character, while maybe not equally as present on screen, I like every character that's crafted in this film, from Mr. Fox to just the wife of Beam, who's just walking around at times. Like, every character, even if they don't get maybe as many moments, they are all still strong characters who all make the film better.
Yeah, every single character has some sort of strong either interaction with another character or just characteristic about them that is memorable. Like the jokes bring back to Bean's wife, that she can't see anything.
Yeah.
So basically, the characters would take that up. Wes Anderson would take that opportunity to make the characters do stupid things in front of her, like how Mr. Fox tries to force his body into the shape of a bottle.
Yeah.
And all that kind of stuff. Or the two Ash and Christopherson, like basically being looking like cookie jars next to him.
Yeah.
And I thought it was super funny and clever.
It's just a lot of that, because we also get moments where, like,
because you remember the characters because they have some striking personality
can
trait.
I tell you, Owen Wilson almost made it into this, like, the 64 Wes Anderson characters, not because he's on screen for a lot. It was just when I was composing of all the characters, like when I was thinking of every character that could possibly be on it, I specifically remembered Owen Wilson in this movie for his interaction with Ash. It's such a brief interaction, but I think it's so funny and just adds a lot to the character of Ash. But it also gives Owen Wilson's character of Coach Skip to just feel like a real character. Every character in this feels real to this world. Even just like Adrian Brody just coming in there briefly as Mouse. Yeah. Mouse is a one-joke character. It just so happens the joke works perfectly in this movie, and they use it so excellently. And here's one thing that, because I've been on the Wes Anderson subreddit for this whole Wild Wild West thing, so I've been talking a lot of Wes Anderson with people, and this is where we'll kind of talk about the bracket a little bit. I thought it was a really interesting point that somebody made, that the reason they weren't having Mr. Fox like way higher, like going to like the Elite Eight or the Final Four, whatever it was.
Oh, that's surprising to me.
They said it's because it's not a Wes Anderson character. When I asked the question of who is the best Wes Anderson character, they're like, well, nobody who's adapted can be the best Wes Anderson character. The best one has to be an original character. It was a point that I didn't think about when making it, because I think the thing that I feel with this movie, I love the book and I love the movie. The book's much more childish and is much more in Roald Dahl style, where this is a very eccentric, wild, indie movie with an adult sensibilities through and through. And it's not just an adult, it is an older adult movie. Like, I didn't realize how much of this movie is just Mr. Fox just straight up not feeling satisfied with what he has. That's a theme he loses as a kid.
Yeah, you know, when you told me we were going to be watching this movie, I got pretty excited because it's one of those things that has been on my back burner for forever.
Yeah, it's been on your radar.
I've never got done it or gotten the chance to, and this time I was like, okay, I get to force myself to do it. And I went on the IMDb page for it the other day and decided to check out some user reviews. And I think it's the main one that gets presented on the page where they say, this is an adult film that kids can enjoy, rather than what Pixar does, which is kids films that adults can enjoy. I think it's super, super prevalent. That entire that statement works its way throughout the entire movie.
Yeah, because it's not a film that looks like a kid's movie, ever. The sensibilities in this film are weird. Yeah, the fashion choices are not one a kid would gravitate towards. It's not going to be one of those one that sells action figures, even though I would kill to have one of those like a
pop vinyl,
the puppet of Mr. Fox. Like, if they could actually make that for me, or I could have that would be the coolest thing in the world to me. But it's, again, just not something that plays to children. I like that in this movie. It is not a kid's movie. The point that I thought was so interesting with that, where he's just a character cannot be the best Wes Anderson without being an original character by Wes Anderson. Here's the thing. I think it is an original character by Wes Anderson. I get it's an adaptation, and I get that book is
but the way he feels is...
the way he brings his own sensibilities give it its own style. I think the book and the movie, of course, there's so many similarities, and I think Roald Dahl's eccentricities and Wes Anderson's maybe are similar at times. But I think it's an original character to me. I get it's like technically not, and I get if it was nominated for an award, it'd be Best Adapted Screenplay. But it's why I gave a lot of these characters precedent to make it far into the tournament. There's 5 characters in this movie that could have made it, and honestly, there's one that should have been in this. Fox, Mr. Fox is in it. He's the number 1 seed. Or maybe I think he's actually the number 2 seed in his bracket. Mrs. Fox just got eliminated.
What?
I could not believe she didn't get out
wonderful.
The first 64, but she was out. Ash Fox is of course in there. Clive Badger is 4. Willem Dafoe was the 5th and final one, which means originally Gambon as Frank Beam was the 6th. Somebody pointed it out to me, and they're like, "You missed 2 crazy important characters," and I'm just like, yeah, they should have made the bracket. Like, thinking about it, I'm just like, it was my mistake that they didn't. And that was the character of Christoph.
Yeah, Christopherson. I was wondering.
Christopherson should have been on there. And what is his name? Who is the friend of... Kylie, yes. He should have been on there too. They should have both been on there. It's the weird thing where it's like, I really can't have more than 6 nominations from each movie, and when Royal Tenenbaums has 8 that have to be on the list, it just, movies had to be cut. But honestly, thinking about it, I would have made room at the very least for Kylie and Christopherson. I think they had legitimate cases. With that all said, there's been a few matchups going on, Joel, so I just want to field and pick your brain real quick on one of them, because you've seen this one. You've seen the movies that they're in. Ned Plimpton is the number 3 seed. That's Owen Wilson's character from Life Aquatic.
Oh, okay.
He's going against the number 11 seed Rat.
Oh, okay.
What is your thoughts on this?
You know, I think this is going to be a very to each his own type matchup. I personally would pick Ned. I think Ned is just such a joy to be around in Life Aquatic. He's such a breath of positivity and fresh air in an otherwise very negative movie. And Rat is kind of the opposite. But Rat is such an interesting villain. And I love that his entire reason for being a bandit and doing what he does is because he wants to be around the cider.
Yeah.
I thought that joke was really funny. And, yeah, but for me, it's gonna be Ned.
Okay. Maybe this is just my bias of how much I love this movie. I had Rat in my own personal bracket, and the voting will be done by the time people hear this. I had Rat going into it. I thought Rat was a really convincingly scary villain. Legitimately, I thought the scenes where he and George Clooney played off each other were excellent. I think the design of that character is really well done. He just has this kind of French sailor look to him that I don't know how else to... He almost looks like a straight up, if you took Andy Warhol and put a rat in Andy Warhol clothing is kind of the style I would describe to him. So he was mine going in. So I think you're right. I think ultimately when the votes are done, and those votes will be done Sunday again, this episode, where either Monday or Tuesday, I think the votes are probably going to reflect yours. I personally voted Rat. This is going to start getting really interesting because Mr. Fox is going up against a character from Grand Budapest that I think he wins. Ash Fox is going up against Ralph Fiennes, who's the main character in Grand Budapest, so that's going to be an interesting round. I don't know who wins that one. With all that said, do you think... Because I think there's 2 characters in this movie that most people would probably say, if they made the final 8, no one would be that shocked. Mr. Fox, and I think Ash.
Really? I was thinking Mrs. Fox.
She's out.
Well, okay. I was talking more...
No, from the beginning, no. I always thought Ash Fox had, I think it's the look. I think it's the costuming is so important for sometimes characters because it's do you remember them. And I think people remember him in the sock.
And also, Ash has, besides Mr. Fox, the most development in the entire movie.
I agree.
I'd say he is the secondary protagonist over Mrs. Fox is much more of a very warm-hearted... she's kind of the heart and soul of the movie. She's the heart of the movie and definitely what brings people together. There's a reason that she was the one, Fox asked her to go to the mine shaft to tell people that help is on the way. For one thing, it was to protect her from anything dangerous that might be happening, to keep her alive. But also because, like, she should be the one going.
Yeah, I agree. I to me personally, Mr. Fox makes it far in my tournament. Not saying exactly where he stops, but to me, I had the case that I'm like, I thought there's a scenario where Mr. Fox could win the whole tournament, in my personal opinion. I thought it was so interesting reading people's thoughts on the subreddit where they had similar ideas, where they're like, is an adapted character, can we really name him best Wes Anderson character? I never even considered that when the bracket was being made. When Francis and I were coming up with the ideas, we never considered that, like, oh yeah, Mr. Fox would maybe even have lower seating because of that. We just kind of gave him the benefit of the doubt, like, that's a beloved movie, people love that character. George Clooney, the star power there, like, he's clearly the number 1 or 2 seed.
Yeah. Which I think is completely rightful, even if he is an adapted character, because of how, for one thing, original the movie is, and how unique Mr. Fox is as a person.
Agreed.
Like, and how much people love this movie. To me, it doesn't matter that he's an adapted character.
The one that I was really shocked the last round, and I think I understand it, but it was that in the first round, we had the upset of Clive Badger beat Jane Winslet Richardson from The Life Aquatic of Steve Zissou. That was an interesting one to me. Jane Winslet was, for those who don't remember, that was Ned Plimpton's love interest in Life Aquatic. That was an interesting one to me. I actually kind of assumed Jane Winslet would have that one in the bag. I think Bill Murray's really funny in this movie. I don't think his character is as big.
No, he's there to be the businessman.
Yeah, like, to me, I kind of remembered Badger having a bigger role in this movie than when I saw it again. I'm like, yeah, like, it was that thing where I just thought about it. I'm like, damn, I really should have put Kylie in this. Like, over, like, honestly, when you're just, like, when you're thinking of everything, it's just like, you know.
Hindsight's 20/20.
Hindsight's 20/20, exactly, but I will just a bit, like, after watching, I'm like, interesting. People seem to gravitate towards it, and I think people are gravitating towards this. Maybe one, because of just the animated love. Maybe they have just a love for this movie. I also just, like, I think sometimes people vote on movies, not characters. I think people love Fantastic Mr. Fox. I get that sensibility from even people who maybe aren't the biggest fan of Wes Anderson. They like this movie.
Yeah.
That's, I think, the biggest praise you can give a movie, where it's just like, I don't like this guy typically, and this movie is completely his sensibility.
And I still like it.
But I still really find this film charming. Because it's such a unique film. I've never seen an animated film quite like this.
Yeah. And I still haven't seen Isle of Dogs yet, so I can't
You're right,
that,
okay. Isle of Dogs, I guess, is very similar to this film.
Should be.
It's another film
but it also
that
came
I
out
quite
almost
enjoy.
10 years later, so, you know.
Let's just talk about a few of the beats that this film hits.
Communism.
Is this a communist story, as you were
this
questioning me at dinner?
Yeah, so this
because
is...
I said, let's save it for the podcast. I don't want to get into this
Yeah, I asked Ben this like
At a
4 different
Mexican
times, and he never answered. I asked him, is this movie about communism? And, well, I'm going to rephrase that. Is it about the extremes of communism and capitalism? I think it is. For one thing, Mr. Fox is a red fox.
Yeah, okay.
Who brings all of the characters together at the end. Meanwhile, you know, the business people, the people running it, go way too far, destroying habitats and businesses. But at the same time, Mr. Fox does go very far and gets people wrapped up in a lot of stuff, and he ends up being a scapegoat for a lot of his own antics that he brought people into. I don't know. It was just one of those thoughts, like, you know, you can make this argument about anything, but I think it's a little bit possible here.
Okay. You could make this argument about anything. Here's something Wes Anderson did say. Wes Anderson has described his latest film, Fantastic Mr. Fox, as communist. This is from Digital Spy 2009 by Simon Reynolds. I do think the movie and Roald Dahl are anarchic, Anderson observed at the film's London Film Press Conference. The movie's a bit of a Robin Hood story, so it's a bit communist, I think. I think it's right. It's the nature of Robin Hood by the idea of Robin Hood and the sensibilities that we have. And is anything ever truly all communist or not all capitalist? It all exists in an area.
Yeah, anytime you have basically big businessman ruins habitat, you could say it's about, well, socialism, communism, environmentalism, anything like that.
Here's how I'm going to frame your question to answer it. Is Fantastic Mr. Fox communist?
Like the actual character?
No, just the movie in general. Here's how I'll frame the question. Here's how I would describe it to anybody listening. I base movies on that, like, is it a message of, if I was to be teaching the ideas of communism and capitalism
to a school,
would I show them
use
this
Mr.
movie?
Fox?
Like, for instance, Ants is a really easy movie to show laissez-faire and all the kind of economic plans in it. That's a really solid one. Could I teach Fantastic Mr. Fox as, this is what capitalism looks like, this is the arguments for communism and against? I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a strong enough message that I could teach it, like, flawlessly. I think I'm bringing in too much of my own personal maybe sway or opinions into that, where it's just like, it's not a clear-cut case of, this is clearly what they're showing, this is what this could be representing, all this.
Yeah, but when you're talking about themes in movies, a lot of it is about your own, how you related to the movie. Like, for me, I saw that message there. I was just, well, not really a message of, like, pick one or the other, just more like, this is the bad outcome. This is the bad outcome of capitalism. This is the bad outcome of communism. And what happens in the end? What does happen in the end? Why am I blanking?
What happens in the end is they beat Beam and they run off and they see the silver fox. Or not the silver fox, they see the wolf.
Right. So a beautiful creature of nature appears at the end.
I just felt like there wasn't enough, like, scene to scene where it's like, okay, look for the communist points in this movie. Like, what would you consider an ideal of communism in this film? Well, this scene, okay, obviously, like, you're right, the message of capitalists being bad, taking down the environment, destroying it. You're right. Could you pull a ton of those to give me an example? I don't know if there would be enough to, like, for instance, create a worksheet.
Fair enough, but also at the same time, when I was kind of laughing at it to myself when I was just like, when I thought of it last night, I was like, oh, he is a red fox, isn't he?
No, you're right.
And I just thought I just thought that connection was kind of funny.
And you're right, because a Robin Hood story is inherently now seen as a little bit of a communist story.
Or at least anti-capitalist.
Your anti-capitalist is probably, that would be
more
maybe
accurate.
Even be a better description of this movie. Is it a communist movie? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think it was about taking resources and redistributing them. Yeah. It was just about, like...
It was taking your own...
It was, actually, to be honest, the movie is about taking advantage of capitalism.
You know what it is? This is the Wall Street 2010 occupation of Wall Street. It's the rich are too rich and the poor are suffering, so thus we are going to occupy and we're going to expect
that does sound,
to take it. That's much more the Robin Hood. If you even want to look a little bit more modern, there's the thing with Reddit about a year ago. You remember that whole thing? The
GameStop stuff?
The GameStop things where it's just like, we're going to F the capitalists and just, buy out all these things and people make billions.
So it's just anti-big business then?
I think it's anti-capitalist, but maybe not necessarily pro-communist.
Yeah.
That's where I'm going to stand on this movie. And I think that is enough.
Pro-anti.
It is enough there to make a worksheet of where the anti-capitalist messages within this film. I will give that film this. Let's talk about a few other things about this movie before we wrap it up. One of my favorite jokes in a movie, and it's one that I used a lot, was replacing curse words with "what the cuss."
What the cuss, yeah.
It is used, mother cusser, like throughout, and it's such an easy, simple joke, and it's so funny each time because, again, one, it gives these characters their own dialect and, like, kind of culture and language. That's just, it's such an easy change to do, and it's just like, oh, they have their own, like, little idiosyncrasies. Like, it's genius. Like, I like that a lot.
I thought it was cool. I didn't think about it too much. Once I, like, registered, like, oh, you're replacing a curse word with the word cuss.
Oh, see,
I was like, for me, that was all it was.
To me, every time it comes up, I'm like, that's a really, like, just clever writing there, like, throughout, and I like that joke throughout. There's other just scenes where there's scenes that even just like, I think Wes Anderson gets to pay homage to some of his other favorite filmmakers. I've always found that scene where it's Fantastic Mr. Fox, it's Clive, it's all the people on his like shoulders, they're walking and the camera's panning towards them as they're walking. I always found that like a really Martin Scorsese directed moment where it's just like, oh, it's the big guys, they're gonna walk into something. Like right now it's like him and his goons, and it's just the absolute just businessman peak of like perfection and confidence. There's just moments in there where we just are left with like beautiful artwork just on screen, like we're just literally just seeing like just beautiful stills.
Yeah,
like,
do you by any chance happen to know what they did with all the models and the sets from this movie?
I do not.
Oh, because
I'm sure some of them are online public. I'm sure you can buy some.
Oh gosh,
I think that would be the coolest thing to own.
That would be
straight
really
up
awesome.
like just have one of those models for this movie.
I have no idea where I would put it though.
I literally have no clue.
It would get destroyed.
It'd have to be
anywhere.
on my shelves because I'd have to have it on display on my channel. But yeah, there's just a lot of scenes like that throughout the movie where I'm like, that's a clear to me an homage of Martin Scorsese. There's even points where I'm like, that feels a little Tarantino, like with just some of the sensibilities in the characters, like maybe even fashion or just how they talk to one another. I think the cussing scene is just like a very Tarantino, like the way they're going back and forth, the cutting of it. One of my favorite just like scenes throughout this movie is, it's a joke they use reoccurring, but it's also just a great character establishment. The whole idea of like, this is our nature.
Yeah.
And when they are just start yelling at each other and they just get in their faces and start just growling at each other, like, and they're just start clawing at each other. I'm like, that is such a just funny representation. And they both have to like put themselves back together. Yeah. And that's where I just was so like impressed with this movie throughout. I'm going to just say, let's just talk to end this on our favorite scenes of the movie. Jalal, what is your favorite scene in Fantastic Mr. Fox?
Oh man, I would probably say probably the heist at the end. Super fun. Trying to get Christopherson back, and that little joke of how Ash is supposed to be like really bad at being a fox, but no one notices when he's there until he talks.
Yeah.
Just like, man, he's like, am I athletic? No. But you can sneak around really well, apparently.
It has one of my favorite, that scene also has one of my favorite jokes where they run to the motorcycle.
Yeah.
And then a really small motorcycle.
Yeah,
like,
I loved that.
And I'm just like, that makes no sense. Like,
Yeah,
why would you have a small motorcycle?
I love
like,
all of these worlds that Wes Anderson is creating.
I love so much, and I described it in Royal Tenenbaums too with Branson when we talked about it. I love that it almost, these films kind of feel like a dollhouse, and he has the toys.
And he's playing with the big...
And he's literally playing with it. Kind of like a kid would, and the sensibilities that a kid would bring into that. Even if it's a much more sophisticated story than a kid would be able to tell. Mm-hmm. But it still feels like kind of that playful, like, oh, what would be the most fun for this character to be doing right now? Oh, what if this character was hanging out with this character? That whole scene is just a set piece of just beauty. I love the scene where Ash is just like, tries to karate chop the gate and the thing ends up just falling and breaking.
Yeah.
And that's how he gets out. I think there's a few of my favorite scenes in the movie. One of them's the dinner scene.
Yeah,
where I think it's a great scene where you get to see the ego of Mr. Fox, because again, we talked about this is a character.
We beat him.
This is a character who doesn't understand like his own ego, and he's so full of himself, and he needs kind of that moment to be to kind of wake up and realize the reality.
Yeah, I think Mr. Fox, huge thing with him is he doesn't understand his own limitations. And by the end of the movie, when he's rallying all these people by saying, like, we all have our own strengths, we all have our own weaknesses, he's admitting that he has his own weaknesses as well. Yeah. He's finally understanding that he's, for lack of better words, human.
Yeah. I love that idea of the movie. I love the scenes where it's literally like a trolley shot, where it's a tracking shot, I guess is the correct term, where it's like the dog, and we're chasing the characters, and I'm just like, dude, like, you didn't have to go that detailed.
That movement was crazy.
Where you're just like, I was thinking about that, I'm like, that must have been the most difficult shot in the film to do. And they do it throughout. Like, they do it a few times where it's just like the dog chasing Fox, and you're just like, they also make a point where it's like Fox is on one side and then he moves to the other side, left, right, left, right. It's not like he's making slight movements. It's like, no, they're doing it, and by making it so, like, it's effortless. That's the thing I found about this movie. I'm like, it doesn't look like there's cuts. It's just so natural in its movement that it doesn't feel like you're watching somebody edit something well.
Talented people can make hard things look easy.
Yeah, and that's the thing. To me, the best editing is the one that's invisible, where you don't even notice the editing in there, where it's just like, sometimes editing can play a part of the movie. Adam McKay with Big Short, Vice, Don't Look Up has shown that editing can play a character within the movie. I always just prefer when it's kind of seamless and you're just like, you're kind of left
drawn
wondering,
into the world.
Yeah, you're just like,
remember they watching a movie.
And for me, after watching that scene, I'm like, I thought about it. I'm like, how did they do that? Like, legitimately, how did they do that one scene? I would love to just get to talk with Wes and just find out, like, this one scene, or even the animators who did it. How did you shoot this one scene, and how much of a pain in the butt was it? My favorite scene in the movie, like I said, that dinner scene's a great one. I love the opening scene where it's just her telling him he's pregnant. That's a really great emotional beat that really establishes the character. I think my favorite has to be when Fox is telling Ash, like, the reason he loves him. And, like, I never wanted anybody more than what you are. Yeah. Like, I thought that's just a really sweet character moment that kind of brings the heart and comedy in it. Because it is a really comedic scene. Because Ash just keeps like, oh, yeah, it was this. And he's just like, okay, you're sidestepping on the story right now. Like, it's just a really great comedic beat mixed with a really great emotional beat. And it's also, again, this last theme that we've talked about in the past few episodes. This is the most healthy relationship a character has with their dad.
Yeah. The most healthy marriage.
Yeah, it's just one of those ones where it's like, okay, Darjeeling had so much to say about that concept and idea that I think, like, Fantastic Mr. Fox kind of gets to be a guy who's grown up and past a lot of that, where it's just like, I'm just going to kind of make a film based on this and with this reality. It's going to be a lot more softer of a character moments between that. I like that. Mrs. Fox is a significantly better written character than a lot of the other female characters in Wes's early career. I think she's a character that completely stands on her own. I love her character. I love the moment where she just kind of
calls out.
She grounds Fox in that moment. Like, it's just like straight up like, I didn't marry you for this reason, like all this. Frank Beam is a really great villain in this movie. You know what might be my favorite scene?
What's that?
It might be, I said it was that emotional beat. I might have to go one of the more comedic beats. It's when Frank Beam and the other farmers decide to, like, stake out the house and just try blowing up Fox. Yeah. And they, like, they grab the tail and all this, and it's just them. The comedic beat of this one scene where Frank Beam with, Dumbledore's voice is calling. And he's just like, oh, I need all these things. And we just see all of a sudden 3 just huge tractors, like, coming in.
Yeah, it sounded like he was ordering takeout or something.
Yeah, and then it's just this, like, kind of glorious shot of them just tracking over.
Great it's the boys! The boys coming in the tractors.
Love that scene. Love the comedy. Love everything this film has to offer. In love with this film. That's everything I have to say on this movie. Jalal, do you have anything else to say about this
I think
movie?
I'm tapped out.
Then let's do it. Let's get to it. Let's talk about it. Let's get to our next segment. Welcome to The Great Debate. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to The Great Debate. I am your host, Ben Friedman. With me, as always, for the month of Wes Anderson is Jalal Ahmad.
That's me.
How we are going to do this. He has a question prep. I have a question prep. We're going to go back and forth. We're going to see who we think has the better answers. You guys are going to let us know. You guys are going to let us know your answers. I love when people text or email or message us and say, this would have been my answer. I think it's so cool. So please, if you're listening to this, please let me know your answers because I'm so curious to hear. We did the same thing where we're just like, why don't we just kind of take the inverse of each of our question? And it kind of works perfectly. So I'll start with mine and you can just say yours as well.
Totally.
Mine's is, what book would you like to see Wes Anderson adapt?
And mine basically was, what should Wes Anderson really stay away from?
Yes. So those are our 2 questions. So let's go worst. Let's just start off with worst. Let's get the bad out of the way.
All right, bad.
You want to go first?
No, you go first.
Okay.
I need to remember. I had it and I had lost it.
Gone Girl.
Okay.
So here's the thing. A few of mine's, in fact, maybe three out of four. Four of my answers are movies already. Gone Girl is a movie that I just do not think fits Wes Anderson's skill set, to say the least. I think it's too dark. The dark comedy is there with that movie, so like maybe Wes could hit some of those points. I think the characters are his characters are a bit too idiosyncratic to really fit into a Gone Girl world. I think it's too dark of a film. I think it's too violent. I don't think it's really a genre that he would do well with a mystery. I want to see Wes Anderson do a murder mystery, like in the style of a Knives Out,
like comedic murder.
Yeah,
mystery.
Murder on the Orient Express, like Clue, like one of those. That's like the type. I don't think a full-on psychological drama that explores, which would now explore post the Me Too movement, because Gone Girl changes its meaning after Me Too. Like, I think the story takes on a whole new layer. Wes Anderson is not the director to give us that one. Well, I think he could handle maybe some of the dark comedy, and that would be the point against me, is he could handle that. I don't think he could really handle any of it other. My other answer was, and I now kind of hate this answer because I wrote it originally as the Iliad and the Odyssey. But now that I think about it,
I don't know. I think that
like
could make
there's a kind of a fun like story. I've always said the Iliad and the Odyssey are two stories that I think are so great, and just we haven't had a great adaptation of it. I'm not saying the books are necessarily my favorites to read, because the books are not my favorites to read.
They are dense.
But the stories within them, just like if you were to summarize the stories are there. But now that I think about it, there's like kind of this weird fun adventure that like you could almost do. And while I can
imagine an Odyssey.
Yeah, and maybe that you don't get the epicness that I'd want in it. Could he do it like something
quirky.
justice? Like maybe there's maybe a chance out there. So I'm gonna do the one property that I've been begging Hollywood to make a good adaptation for years. And every time they make one, I go see it, and every time it's disappointing me, except for one occasion, which was The Sorcerer and the Stone. I really want a King Arthur story. That's been the thing that I've been craving as a kid. I think a well-done King Arthur movie or franchise would be just as successful as The Lord of the Rings, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, DC, whatever franchise you want to put out. I think if you got a great filmmaker, that would become one of the biggest films of all time. I truly believe King Arthur, with not just like the one story of King Arthur like getting the sword. I mean, we're talking all of Camelot,
all the politics,
all the knights,
all the cheating on each other,
all of
that
it.
good
Just
stuff.
the centuries of stories we have with King Arthur. I think that would make a really interesting thing, and Wes Anderson is not the guy I want to see make that movie. I need it to be the epic Lord of the Rings scale, Game of Thrones, Marvel, whatever you want to throw. I need the Dune type filmmakers to take a huge, ambitious swing with it. Not saying Wes wouldn't be ambitious. He's just not my guy for this. His sensibilities do not fit with these characters. I need epic, not quirky. So the film franchise that I want to see become the biggest, it cannot go to this director. So those are my answer for worst. Joel, what about you?
The Percy Jackson series.
You know what's funny? I almost put that as the worst too.
Yeah,
because
that is actually what I had earlier originally.
Here's what I thought too with that. They're making the Disney Plus.
Is that still happening?
Yes, it is confirmed. I think that one could be pretty big. I think the Percy Jackson has enough to build like a young fan base that I think it just has the potential to break out pretty well.
Oh no, the kids still read those books like crazy.
I think it's there, and I don't think Wes Anderson, again, for the epicness of those stories. I just don't think
for
the stories
very
are there.
similar reasons as what you were talking about with the King Arthur series. It's just that the way he writes kids would not be how I want to see like Percy, Annabeth, and
Agreed,
Grover.
they're too eccentric.
Yeah, they're too adult. If you gave it to Wes Anderson, you end up losing that magic of those kids.
Yeah, I think there needs to be a real innocence with those characters, which I'm not saying that Wes Anderson kids aren't innocent, but they definitely have adultish qualities.
They're a lot more,
them.
how to say this, cynical.
They are, and I don't want that cynical.
Yeah, you don't want that cynicism with child heroes.
Agreed. I put that. I almost had another book I was trying to think of what was another bad one. I was trying to think of what was another bad one. I was trying to think of what was another bad one. I was trying to think of what was another bad one. I was trying to think of what was another bad one. I was trying to think of what was another bad one. I was trying to think of what was another bad one. I was trying to think of what was another bad one. I was trying to think of what was another bad one. I was trying to think of what was another bad one. I was trying to think of what was another bad one. I was trying to think of what was another bad one. I was trying to think of what was another bad one. I was trying to think of what was another bad one. I was trying to think of what was another bad one. I was trying to think of what was another bad one. I was trying to think of what was another bad one. I was trying to think of what was another bad one. I was trying to think of what was another bad one. I was trying to think of what was another bad one. I was trying to think of what was another bad one. I was trying to think of what was another bad one. I was trying to think of what was I almost put, and why am I blinking? Oh, Dracula.
Oh my god, that popped into my head too.
I was like, would he do a good Dracula?
No,
but then I'm just like,
he could do a funny vampire movie for sure.
That's where I'm like, could Dracula kind of be funny? But no, as a horror character, he could not do it. I think horror is just, Snyder and I talked about the same thing. I would not want to see a horror movie from Anderson.
Yeah, you know, get an indie rock soundtrack behind it or a 60s rock soundtrack, you kind of ruin the vibe.
Exactly. Let's go best.
Oh, okay.
You start first since you kind of sabotaged the last category.
Yes, I did. Okay. So, if we are extending into the world of comic books,
I didn't think of it, but I'll allow it.
Yeah, one thing I was actually thinking that would be kind of cool is if we took Spider-Man and a lot of his stories and turned them into comedic Wes Anderson stories.
I don't like it.
You don't like it?
I do not like it.
Fair enough. I get it. I think I'm just hitting on it, but you know.
If you wanted to sell me on Wes Anderson making a superhero film, I think you could sell me on it.
Thor?
Not Thor. You would need to get a character like, not Howard the Duck level of comedy, but I would need more of a Squirrel Girl, for instance. Might be his sensibilities. If you were to try selling me on Spider-Ham or Spider-Man Noir, you could sell me.
See, Spider-Verse was what was
Peter
popping
Parker.
into my head. I don't know. I think that the nerdiness of Peter Parker, if you kept his positivity and optimism in spite of all of his hardships intact, I think that comedy could work.
I think there's a chance some of the comedy could work. I think it's still the same issue. I do never want to see a cynical Spider-Man.
No.
And I think the humor, even in like this, which is a pretty lighthearted movie, I think the humor still tends to lean
What if
cynical.
everyone is cynical except Peter? So he's just one of the jokes is that he is this giant, bright, optimistic dude in New York. I guess that's already just the reality of it, isn't it?
Yeah, sorry, fam, you can't sell me on this. I'm really just like... like I said, if you were to give me one of the other Wes Anderson like Spider-Man spin-offs, there's a world where I see that.
Okay.
I can't give you Peter Parker or Miles Morales. I think it's just too much of my history with these characters. Is that your... did I just crap on your only pick?
Dude, I had some other one, but I'm so tired I forgot.
Okay, it's totally fine. Here are my two picks. I had Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. I get the animated movie is like kind of perfect to me, and I love that movie. There is a really off-base, off-kiltered, wild Wes Anderson movie to be made with those characters that I think would fit his sensibilities perfectly. A lot of those characters are weird. Lewis Carroll is a weird figure.
Yeah.
And I just think those true sensibilities work really well. I think it's a really easy picture to see. The other one is, did you ever read Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut?
No.
I think he would nail it. It is a dark, cynical comedy that is also stands in as a horror film of the tragedies of war. I think you get the comedy mixed with the drama pretty perfectly. You could follow maybe a little bit of a younger protagonist. I'm blanking on the main protagonist in Slaughterhouse-Five, who I believe is a soldier, but I think you could have it be a little bit of a younger soldier, maybe like 20, 25, kind of just him witnessing, kind of him growing senseless because of the violence that he's witnessing. I think there would be a lot of prestige to see a Wes Anderson direct this type of movie that gets the dark, cynical humors of Kurt Vonnegut's writing so well, mixed with the drama that he does so well. I also thought about Mark Twain, like Tom Sawyer. I think he could, because a lot of his films have that Twain sensibility to it, but I just didn't want to go Twain. I couldn't go Huck, because I think that film's too problematic to ever be made. I don't know if you could actually get a Huck Finn adaptation.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it can be made, so I just couldn't go with it. And I'm like, I like Tom Sawyer, but I think Huck's the better story. But you can't make Huck a story, and I don't know if Tom could, so I didn't go with that. So yeah, my two picks are Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Slaughterhouse-Five. With that all said, that's our show. We'll be back on the air. Moonrise Kingdom is with Jeff Snyder, so you guys will be hearing that next. And the episode after that, Jalal and I will be back talking the Grand Budapest Hotel.
Ooh, excited for that one too.
Yeah, we're getting close to done. So thank you for listening, guys. Check me out on the Beneverse on YouTube. Check out my 94th Academy Award predictions. See if I was wrong. Check out all my other stuff going on my YouTube channel. Find the links all on my socials at the Metaverse, Twitter and Instagram. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Good night.